Welcome to Rootstem Gaming, and this is painting Death's Heads and War Griffins. Right, so to begin with, I'm actually painting two, these are for a commission, so these are going to be Lego Mortis, and these two skeletal ones are going to be Lego War Griffins. Forgot my name. These are built because, of course, I've come from as a commission. So if I've already built them, I don't build figures unless you pay me extra. So they're pre-built. These are two skeletal ones because these are going to be my figures. So I'm going to basically do a. These guys are going to have black and red carapace. I'm even going to try and show you some chevron in as well on some of the armor plates, just like in the actual books. And these are going to have that unique, lovely sort of misty pattern. If I can achieve it properly, we will see. So these are basically how to paint for Warlord Titans. So I'm starting on the skeletal frames. I'm just going to be using just some standard silver. I use lead belcher, but I'm just going to be spraying this on now. I'm not using the lead belcher spray paint because I don't like it. It sometimes makes it glossy and becomes quite hard to actually put Null oil and various other different bits and bats on there. I'm also doing it in a downward motion just to try and give it a bit of a highlight. So if you notice, I'm not coming at it from the bottom up. I'm just actually coming at these from the top down. Now this is what I do when I'm actually doing the ones that are already pre-built. I take my nozzle off, making sure that I'm going to get a narrower stream, because that's what happens with my airbrush. And then of course I'm just going to paint the silver bits in as neat as I possibly can. We've not gone on to the rest of the armor panels yet, so any tidying up that we can be doing it later. And this is just basically just me just making sure that I'm going to get all the silver highlights into where I need them. I try and just keep 30 psi on the airbrush, well, between 20 and 30 to be honest, and make sure that the liquid is nice and runny. Because it's skim milk, of course. Repeating the same process on the bodies. As you can see, I'm just avoiding the top with the skeletal one because, of course, that's going to contain armour. So I'm just trying to be as neat as I possibly can on the standard armour pieces that I'm currently painting. Again, trying to attack it more of a downward motion so that I'm getting a highlight. Just trying to use the natural progress of the actual black to give it a subtle difference. Now, as you can see on the death set, the ones that's constructed, it's a good video because it shows you both. It's a lot harder, and I did drop it, yeah, don't tell him. It's a lot harder to try and get those areas. You've got to make sure that you're not going to try and overspill onto the armor plates. But the natural sort of feathering effect of the dry brush is kind of going to give you a shade towards the armor panels. So it's a twofold thing. Sometimes it actually works well when you're actually painting a figure with an airbrush that's already there. I'm probably going to show you some masking effects later on as well, because it's always nice to make sure that you're masked off. Remember, if it's on the underside, it never normally needs as much as it does on the upper bit. And of course, I'm going to be trying to paint the actual eyes inside these. Now, I've done the weapons and I've also done the top weapons on the carapace. I'm not going to show you that because it's just the same thing repeated. I'm now going to go in with some Stormhost silver. That's what the lighter silver that I use. You can use whatever you want. And again, just doing it in a diagonal motion, making sure that I'm catching the top raised areas. I'm not catching the whole model. I'm just catching enough to give it a nice highlight. You could also possibly use a dry brush at this stage as well. Neck on compound, and here of course I'm just showing you how I'm doing it. I'm doing more of a spot highlight when it comes to the one that's already got the armor plates actually on there. On the body we're going to be repeating pretty much the same thing, just keeping it more towards the edge when you're doing the skeletal frame, and on the one with the actual armor plates you're pretty much just going to be doing it with again just spot detailing, just to try and make sure any edges that are going to have ages. Any edges that I've got more light showing are going to actually be lighter in colour. Remember to be neat, because of course the neater you are now, the less overwork you're going to have to do later. Now this is what I mean by actually having the area masked. It looks like something very creepy. I'm just using standard masking tape, taking the stickiness out by padding it with my fingers and applying it onto the carapace. This is going to help when it comes to actually painting a lot of the colours we're going to require for this Death's Head unit. Now we're going to come in with some, well, it's basically like a lightish grey. You could probably use grey black, I think it is, for Vallejo, but I'm currently using Dawnstone. And what I'm doing is just trying to give myself a bit of a highlight on the edges of the black. Rather than using just like a standard dry brush or white technique, I'm just going to edge it, just giving it a nice little difference, just giving it a subtle twist, because airbrush, you can do that, you can't really do that with a brush sometimes. Just makes it look nice, giving it a slight bit of the edges. As you can see, I'm actually doing the edges across the top of the carapace, down the back onto the exhausts. I don't know whether or not I'm going to actually do, I don't think I didn't do the ports at the top. I didn't do them blue to show the shields, but that's by and by. Yeah, just doing the edges of the shields, anywhere you think's actually going to have a little bit of a highlight on the black. Remember, we're going to be doing the trims. We're going to be painting the trim up a different colour, so you don't really need like an edge highlight on this. You just need to make sure that you've got a bit of paneling, bit of a panel highlight, a bit like if you could see a gloss bit on the car. Nothing too fancy, just giving it a subtle difference from the standard black. Doing the leg panels next. Now the leg panels themselves are a bit more tricky because they're smaller, of course, smaller pieces, but you're still just kind of trying to get that edge, and I've just been trying to put the edge on these lower down rather than it being kind of 3/4 or a third way down the actual paneling, which is what I did on the top piece. I made sure that these were further down because of course the actual Titan itself will probably be casting more of a shadow over itself, meaning that the light wouldn't actually catch until quite close to the bottom of the feet. Now what I'm doing here is I'm going back in again, same, more Dawnstone, I'm not changing the colour, and I'm just kind of running a bit more on it, a bit more aggressive, a bit more concentrated into edges. Again, this is just part of the highlighting process. It's a bit like when you do an edge highlight and you're doing the edge highlight on an area where you've already been before, but with an airbrush you build up layers, and you build up lots of layers. It's impossible to state how many layers you build up with an airbrush, but you start off with one, you start off by just brushing it over, and you go back and you do it again, and it makes it brighter and more vibrant, and you do a narrower line or further down or something slightly different, just so you get a nice transition between the original colour and the colour that you intend to have on the figure. Don't forget as well, I will be repeating this process on the weapons. I'm just, at that point, I'm just not going to show you those bits because of course it's just the same thing, but I'm doing over and over again. I know I'm showing body and legs, they're a bit more detailed, but with the weapons it's just quite simple. They're just quite curve or flat panels. Remember to keep doing as many layers as you want until you get the desired colour. You can even add a little bit more of a lighter grey in there if you wanted. Now as you can see, I've masked off different areas now. We're going to be going into the red. Now I've used quite a dark red. This is actually a really old red, and I'm just trying to get rid of it. It's more like a corn red or really dark red that you can get from Vallejo, or even if you use P3, just try and match it up as best as you can to workshop colours. Workshop colours of course are easy to get access to, and it's easy to look at them on the website. Also, I don't mind admitting I am a bit of a workshop fanboy, but I do like their colours. Not the air ones. I actually prefer their standard paints and thinning them down with some Vallejo actual thinner. Well, I use a mix of thinner and airbrush flow improver. Some people use water. I tend to find sometimes with certain paints or colours, water, it doesn't do it justice, so I just tend to use a bit of thinner and a bit of the old flow improver, only a couple of drops sometimes, that's all it's needed, depends on how thin the paint is. Get it to that lovely semi-skimmed consistency, and then just start blowing it through that airbrush. As you can see, I keep building and building and building, and I'm building up the colour nicely. Now on the legs, as you can see, the difference in masking is I have masked off for a Chevron Effect. I am of course narrowing down the beam, making sure that I'm not going to get this everywhere. And now with this, what I tend to do with a Chevron Effect is make sure that you get the lighter colour in the middle. So all over spray, and then keep going over that centre, you know, getting narrower and narrower until you got a lovely decent look. Some people like to put a bit of sort of either a tiny bit of blue tack or masking on that process just to sort of give it a chipped effect. I'm coming in with a highlight now. I'm actually using the Feastin' Red again, building up those layers, making sure that those layers make it look nice. You're getting a good transition, trying to avoid a lot of sort of like well, I don't know if it's an eagle, it's that sort of spread iron wing type effect that you get on the side of these figures. Just making sure that a lot of that remains dark, and just going into the sides, just giving it a lovely sort of crossfade. Just building up those layers. I know I keep repeating that word, but it is important, and that's what you need to do. Again, on the legs, I'm just going to try and concentrate in the centre. I'm not really going to go too far on the outskirts. It's mainly just to give it that nice little highlight. Of course, a complement the previous red we've used. And this should be what your red looks like when you've actually done. So in the next stage, I've actually gone and known oil all the metallic parts. This is just to dull it down a little bit, and of course give it a bit of a shade. Have a look now. You'll notice that the colours look a bit duller, but still a bit of shine to them. So we've kind of like highlighted it up, and then we're bringing it back down again to try and contrast and bring all the colours together. And that's of course my skeletal ones for the War Griffins, and that's for Mortis. So the next bit will be getting some heads done. So more masking. This is to make sure that I'm not going to get any sort of this colour in the eyes, and I'm going to use like a dark stone. Like this is Carrick stone from Workshop that I'm using, but you can use any sort of stone based or creamy based paint. I am going to be going on top of that with a bone colour. Again, your Shabty bone from Workshop. I tend not to use any other colours, but it's easiest to get hold of. In my local shop, if I've run out, that's what they have. They have Workshop paints, and of course it's quite easy to colour match when I need it. Well, when I need to, even if I actually watch some other programs, just to try and figure out how I'm doing it. Now I'm going as light as I possibly can. Again, just doing a couple of layers because I am going over black with a lighter colour. I sometimes think you get a really nice sort of recessed shade when you do that. Just making sure that each layer is drying before I think I do make a mistake actually while doing this, but making sure that each layer is dried before putting more paint on top. It's quite a thin colour, and it can be quite runny, so it can move if you've not let it dry. Coming in with the lovely creamy sort of Ushabti bone, or bleach bone as it used to be called. I'm not going too deep, just going inside the panels. Some people once complain that you get a cartoony effect. I don't think you do, not with airbrushing. I think sometimes it's nice to have that edge highlight, just making sure that it's nice and dark. Again, make sure that all your Carrick stone or whatever you use there is dry, because if it's a thin paint, it's going to run. And you never want streaks when you're airbrushing. It's the most annoying thing in the world. As you can see, all that edge, multiple layers, especially with these type of things. Be careful of spatter, because again, it's a runny paint, it's a light paint. Sometimes you will get a spatter there. As you can see, that's already started to run, so I'm just going back over it again, trying to clear it off. Hopefully that will actually turn out okay. I also added a little white to the Ushabti bone towards the end. just to pick out the furthest bits of the face. You don't have to do this, but I just think it adds a nice touch. Now I'm doing the grey on the actual war griffins. I've masked off the areas I don't want to get an overspatter on. And I'm just going to use your standard dark grey. This one is Mechanicus standard grey. Again, I'm just going to be painting as much as I possibly can. Just trying to give it a nice, like another sort of, how would I put it, another undercoat or another primer. There's a lot of Americans, you Americans out there like to say primer. We just tend to call it an undercoat. So yeah, tend to give it a secondary undercoat with the Mechanicus standard grey, because we're going to be doing some tips and tricks on top of that. And as you can see from the back of the funnels, I do use the tack that is blue. Don't be afraid to use multiple different sources when you're actually giving yourself a masking. I use a mixture of the tack that is blue. I don't know if it's copyright to say the other one or to say the other way around, but I'm not going to go fall into that trap. Sometimes mask areas off as quickly with a bit of paper or card. That's more like shielding, so you're not going to get your overspray. I do use just normal masking tape. Again, just it tends to be the duct tape variety, good quality stuff, and I just run it on my fingers. Just put it onto your fingers, sort of slap it about, take it on, take it off. Takes away a lot of the glue. You can always use the rubbing across the side of a table trick that you may have learned in school as well. You've also got standard modelling masking tape, which is what I actually used on the chevrons. So that's always available. I'm guessing that's always available at your local hobby store. It is at mine, but if not, you could probably use Amazon or some website to be able to get hold of something similar to that. Now I'm going to go on to the second stage, and I believe the paint that I'm using there is possibly Dawnstone. I'm going to be putting that, I'm going to be sponging it, keeping of course the masking on. Yeah, it's Dawnstone. And I'm going to be sponging this lightly all over the figure. The War Griffins have a ghosty light grey, which is what I'm going to try and achieve by doing a combination of airbrush and sponging techniques. Now, when I've actually done the process with Dawnstone, I repeat the process with an Administratum grey from Workshop, so a lighter grey. And if you can see from the right, it is quite sort of a, it's got a nice sort of, looks a bit, a bit speckly. And now I'm going to actually use some really, really thin down Dawnstone. I'm going to put this back over the top. That's why I was testing it before. I was setting my airbrush. My airbrush has actually got a lock, so I can set it to all the trigger to only pull back so far, so that it's not going all the way. And I'm going to be basically glazing over. This is to try and make sure that you're getting a nice transition of all of those lovely colours that you got on there. The grey, the three different greys, and of course this should tie it all together and bring it all looking like one. He's created that lovely sort of stippled ghosty sort of grey, something that I'm just trying to emulate from Workshop's own, especially the Forge World sort of images that they've created for the War Griffins. Now the next task is to trim the edges of the Titans. For this I'm just using, I believe it's Retributor Armor Gold. Retributor Armor, sorry, gold. Yes, it is. Yes, I know I'm using it straight from the pot. It's because I'm wanting to try and get this on in one coat rather than having to go back over and over and over it. You can thin it down if you want, but I'll be honest with you, painting trims is the most tedious and laborious stuff I've come across, especially with the amount of trim that's on this figure. Now, what I've done is just to paint all the gold Retributor armor, then I've run Seraphim Sepia all over the gold just to give it a bit of a shade. I'm probably going to use some Stormhorse silver on the extreme edges just to highlight. The weapons, if you can see, I've put white, well, a grey and white dots just to highlight and of course bring out those little tiny missiles. And then I ran a little bit of Caribou Crimson and Null Oil over the recesses of the panels, just so that we can get a slightly darker shade from the airbrush. Here's one of the finished ones. This is the Lego Mortis one. I've done the transfers. Come on, focus you boy. And I've done my own basing technique. So that'll be number 1 completed. Number 2 just needs the gold trim doing. Problem with gold trim, it takes ages. That's why I only did one and went into other things to finish it. The others are waiting to be finished. So I've cut out the rest of the armour panels using of course some cork and blue and the tack of blue. I'm just basically giving all of these a coat over, basically just priming them with the Leisure black grey, I believe it is, or of course a really dark sort of grey, a lot closer to black. Probably achieve the same thing by just getting Mechanicus and black and just mixing that two together. I have blue tacked these down because they do like to move if you don't, and just put them into my makeshift spray booth. Lovely cardboard box, and just making sure that all of the aspects of the trim are going to be coated in this colour. Now I'm going to be applying Mechanicus Standard Grey onto the figures now, so that once the actual shade is dry, I'm going to get all this lot painted up. Again, keeping majority of the armour plates off the model to do this. Of course, we're going to do the stippling effect that we did earlier on the upper carapace, so you need to repeat that once, of course, the Mechanicus is dry. So we're going to be doing the Dawnstone followed by the Administratum Grey, and then of course the watered down Dawnstone afterwards. There's little bits of, if you notice, some little tiny bits of night bits that I'm actually doing on at the same time. So I'll put all that into my video. You know, you're going to get 3 for 1 now. So you've got the night bits, and you're also getting the little bits for 2 sets of different Titans. If you're just going to get one, if you've only got one Mechanicus box, then you can always paint one up as Death Head and paint one up as the War Griffins. We've played a few games and we're quite enjoying it at the moment. They do seem quite good. I'm going to look forward to getting some more figures, although it is turning out to be quite a pricey game. Rest of the armour pieces, of course, put them into a box, doing them separately. Still give them, because of course I've sprayed everything with that black grey. That was Avalanche Sunset base, and I did a highlight with Flash Gits yellow, as you can see. And then of course I'm going to stick all this together and then put it onto the figure. And as you guessed it, more gold trim. As you can see, these two are pretty much done. Got the transfers on as well, and I've painted up the grey, of course, done the yellow with the usual striping, similar to what I did with the red striping. And I've even, on mine, because these are actually mine, I've put some transfer numbers on the back, so when I'm playing the game, I actually know which Titan is which, allowing me to be able to mark them up properly. And that is it. As you can see from the images, I've just done the basing and then just made sure that the actual figures themselves are all completed. I have put an epic figurine, an old epic figurine, very old one, because that's one of the first Land Raiders, onto one of the bases just for scale, and that's pretty much done. I did varnish them. I always use testers, so they are varnished. Even though they are plastic, you can still rub, especially when you're using airbrushes. You should always varnish the figures, because you can rub the paint off. It's very thin. It's very thin, it's very in layers. That's the idea, is that it's partially translucent, so it gets a better sort of consistency between your base colours and your highlights. Well, thanks for watching, guys. Please like, share, subscribe, hit that notification button if you want to see more. I'm also on twitch.tv/Rootstem Gaming, although please be aware there's been not much activity on that lately due to work, my actual other job. And you can buy t-shirts as well, Rootstem Gaming t-shirts. I will get some more designs of those eventually done. Those are at Teespring, and you just, in the search bar, just hit Rootstem Gaming. And some people have been asking about dice. They'll be available soon too. Well, thanks very much for watching, guys. See you next time.